And turning now to the latest on the midterm elections as the Republicans inch closer to House control. But more on this, we have our very own senior columnist, Rick Newman. Rick.
Hey, so President Biden has acknowledged that Republicans probably are going to take the House, but as everybody probably knows by now, with a much smaller majority, perhaps single-digit numbers of seats than just about every poll predicted going into the midterm elections. The Senate, still very close. There are two races still to call, Nevada and Arizona. And then in Georgia, that was too close. Nobody got over 50%. And by the rules there, that will go to a runoff election in December. If Democrats win two of those three seats, they will at least have the same 50-50 tie that they have now, which means they would have de facto control of the Senate because the vice president breaks tie votes. So it looks like Democrats have a pretty good shot of holding on to the Senate, but we're most likely going to have a divided government, even though the Republican majority in the House is going to be whisker thin.
And a slightly different picture, however, in the race for a majority in the Senate. As you were laying this out, I mean, there still is, of course, the Manchin factor. So as you're continuing to really evaluate where the dust will settle, what are the biggest expectations kind of going into the time frame as to when we'll finally have some solid answers?
So in the Senate, we should know, I think we're going to know about the races in Nevada and Arizona within a couple of days. I mean, they've got, about 80% or more of the vote counted there, and they're counting mail ballots and things like that. If the Democrats win both of those seats, then we know that they will have at least 50. So that makes the Georgia runoff election a little bit less important. But if let's say they only win one of those seats, then everything is riding on the Georgia runoff again, exactly as happened during the 2020 election. And one of the things you're hearing is concerns that if it does come down to Georgia, that Donald Trump is going to get involved, especially if he does announce a presidential run as early as next week, which he has hinted he is going to do. So the concern among Republicans is that Trump just won't get out of the way, and that when we do get to the Georgia runoff, that it is going to be more about Donald Trump than it's going to be about the two Senate candidates. And of course, that didn't work out for them in 2020. Many analysts think that Trump blew the Senate race for Republicans, and that's why Democrats took the House. They took the Senate. In the House, the sort of interesting storyline or narrative now is the difficulty Kevin McCarthy, who is the de facto Republican leader and the House Minority Leader, that he seems like he might have trouble getting elected Speaker of the House, which has been his lifelong ambition and something that seemed very, very likely if there was a red wave. Because there was not a red wave, a lot of that is now falling on McCarthy, and we could see a real challenge to his leadership, assuming Republicans do take the House. So even though the midterms are over, we have plenty of political drama left.
If there was one theme or kind of commonality that you saw across races over the course of this midterm election, what would you really kind of sum that up to or really round that out to? Because you break down a few themes there, and Paul Ryan had actually said this as well, that we don't win with Trump in 2024. So what are some of those themes that you saw that really jumped out and it could permeate even over into the general election in 2024?
Yeah, Paul Ryan said that on a great interview I think you guys did with him a couple days back. Well, he seems to be very right about that, and it's even now seems to be the case that Republicans cannot win with Donald Trump in 2022. I think that was the clearest takeaway from the 2022 midterms this year, is that Trump's influence is fading, and it's perhaps fading dramatically. There were a lot of candidates, especially for the House, who Trump endorsed and helped them win in the primary elections, also statewide candidates, and but they were too extreme to win in the general election. That was basically the problem with Trump himself in 2020. So Trump seems to be the last person who will ever acknowledge this, which means we're going to have a massive fight in the Republican Party for the next 2 years. And the biggest change there, I think, is that given the fact that the Trump factor is actually harming candidates rather than helping them, you're going to see a lot more mainstream Democrats who feel it's safe to come out and criticize Trump publicly. So this is how Trumpism goes away. Now, Trump will always have his adherents, But when you see that other people in the party are more and more willing to break from him, that's where we're going to get a potential leadership change.